Hi everyone, my name is Cindy Gao and I'm a current P3, and today we're going to be talking about France and just a little bit about why I chose to do France. I did take French back before pharmacy school started, and then during my third year of undergrad I did do a study abroad where I was able to go to London and Paris. And then as for the presentation itself, I'll just go through some French history, touch a little bit on the French language, and then get into the food and desserts. Alright, thanks, let's get into it. Okay, so for some background information about France, its official name is the French Republic. Its capital is Paris, France, and the official language is French. For the size of the country, so I have a map right there to the upper right. It is about the same size as Texas, and all of the country's borders are actually almost like naturally divided with mountain lines and then also the Rhine River. And then to the lower right there, I have an image of the flag, which has three colors. The white is representative of the king, as white was the traditional color of the House of Bourbon, who ruled France in the late 1500s until the French Revolution happened. And then the blue and the red are representative of the city of Paris, as the revolutionaries during the French Revolution, they wore blue and red ribbons on their hats. And the population of France is about 67 million compared to the 330 million of the United States. And then its official currency, main currency, is a euro, and 1 euro is equal to 1.2 $1.20 about right now. And then now for a really quick rundown, very simplified version of French history that may be skipping a few years here and there. But to start with, so the French Renaissance in the 1400s was really the start of the really early modern era, as there was a large amount of like cultural development and also like geographical expansion that was obtained through a series of wars. During that time, there was also like a lot of scientific development and then also of inventions that occurred. And towards the end of the French Renaissance, under the rule of Louis XV, France did start to have a lot of financial problems, which is what in a large part led to the French Revolution. And after that, the French Revolution, which started in 1789 with the storming of the Bastille. It resulted in a declaration which had phrases of the natural and imprescriptible rights of men, liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. Freedom of speech and press were also declared, and then also that position appointments were based on talent as opposed to birth. And then another part of the declaration was that the Roman Catholic Church's properties were being sold, which this was a large trigger for increased tensions, which led to a civil war. And this resulted in a French constitution. And the largest point of the French Constitution was that it made the absolute monarchy that France had into a constitutional monarchy. And there were a lot more wars that happened, and then when Napoleon came into power, he was able to lead France through another period of great geographical expansion and then also cultural expansion and development. But he was defeated at the Battle of Waterloo in Russia, which happened in 1815. And after him, his nephew, which was Napoleon III, ruled for a few years until about 1870 when the Third Republic took over. And after that, there was World War I and World War II, which I'm sure a lot of us, if not all of us, had to learn about back in high school. But after that, the way France's cultural development is very, hasn't changed that much to what we are used to in modern day. Alright, so moving on, so with the official language of France, of French, one of the large distinguishing features that I noticed when I was learning this was that French pronunciation does not look like you cannot pronounce it phonetically for the most part. Back when I was learning this, I had switched to French after a few years of taking Spanish, and it was just a little bit of a difficult switch just because there were so many words that were similar to Spanish, and yet for some reason they were pronounced completely different. And when we were learning about it, one of the large reasons was because of the history of France and like where the country is. The French language is a mix between Latin and then also Gaulish, which is an ancient language from a region back, which is current day like France and Belgium. And then for a few phrases that you may be able to use if you were to ever travel, so hello is bonjour. How are you is comment allez-vous. So with that, the T connects into the allez-vous because the letter immediately following the T is a vowel. So you'll see that a lot where they blend letters together just to make it flow a little better and sound a little bit more pleasing to the ear. Next phrase is my name is Cindy, so je m'appelle Cindy. I can't speak French well, which would be je ne parle pas bien français. And then last one, do you speak English? So parlez-vous anglais? And just a few phrases there for you if people were interested in what the French language sounded like, and then maybe piqued your interest to help you start learning French. With French cuisine, a lot of people attribute its sophistication due to an Italian influence, as back in the 1400s, French cuisine was really rustic and they used seasonings for the most part just to cover up the taste of spoiled food. But then in about like 1550, Catherine de' Medici, who was an Italian noblewoman, she came over to France and married into the royal family, and she ruled over France as queen for about a decade. And with her came a lot of Italian chefs and tradesmen. And under her rule, they were able to teach the Frenchmen a lot of techniques and tricks, which they were able to incorporate into their own cooking already. And this led to a more elaborate presentation and utilization of like a lot of ingredients from different cultures. And this is what many people think of when they hear French cuisine. So lots of like intricate presentations and then precise techniques. And many professional chefs consider the mastery of French cuisine to be a great achievement in their culinary careers. And like in contrast, there was a new style that came about in about like 1970 that features lighter dishes with fewer ingredients. And while that is a little bit more popular just because it is a little bit easier, classic French cooking is more so like heavier sauces and very complicated presentations with like lots of steps. And the image to the right there is a classic French dish, which is like a beef stew, and it's like a stew made with beef braised in red wine, beef broth, and like seasoned with garlic, onions, and mushrooms. And it is a very long process that can take a whole day. And with French cuisine, the classic it does change from region to region. So with like the southern region, a lot of their foods are associated with more rich flavors, so like garlic, herbs, heavier meats, and then mushrooms. And then northern cuisine is a little bit more lighter, one would say, so some produce and more dairy products. Now I'm going to be moving on to the French desserts. And so France is very famous all over the world for their desserts, and the word dessert actually is derived from the French word desservir, which means to clear the table. And usually the development of desserts was like in the past in France, they would serve fruit or cheese after meals, and then it slowly became more sweeter baked goods, and they just began to develop like a whole large amount of recipes, which they have very much perfected, and many people enjoy, and luckily we were very lucky to have them develop it. But some classic ingredients include like custard, cream, and fruits. The custard is a very typical French ingredient in pastries, as this makes the desserts extra rich and creamy. And then a characteristic of many French desserts is that it's like light and fluffy in texture, so not very dense. And then also like sometimes very layered. So like for the images to the right that I have, so starting with the one in the upper left corner, it's like a millefeuille, like a non-traditional one, but it's like layers of puff pastry, cream, and then like fruit. And then right below that is a opera cake, which is like a chocolate cake, but it has like layers of cake, like chocolate ganache, and then cream. And then next to that are eclairs. Above that is a crepe Suzette, which is a specific picture I have, but crepes in general, which is like a really thin, light, fluffy pancake. And then for a crepe Suzette, it's drizzled in like an orange glaze. And then the image above that are macaroons, which is like a cookie sandwich, essentially very chewy, light cookies, and then like usually a cream filling on the inside. But I have personally tried to make a few of these before. They've never quite turned out quite right. Um, just very difficult to get the technique right without practicing a few times. But I would say it's definitely fun, and if you get it to turn out correctly, it's very rewarding. And yeah, just a lot of time goes into this, a lot of effort, attention to detail, and like very precise measurements of like all the ingredients that go in there. And there is a little like bakery in Columbus, so in the short north. It's called Pistachio Vera, which they do, in my opinion, they have very good, like a closer to classic French desserts. So if you guys ever wanted to try, I would say that would be a good location to visit. And then just a list of all like the sources I used to put this presentation together. But thank you so much for listening.